Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chronicles of Old Singapore. This is Dr. Loh KS. I'm a people's historian interested in all things in the history of Singapore, the lives of its people, and its connections with the wider world. In this channel, I speak to people about their memories of old Singapore before it became a global city today. So, Chronicles of Old Singapore is centered around three main themes. One, we're going to be talking about stories of interesting people and memorable places in old Singapore. Two, change and continuity in the time between the past and the present. And three, what is the role of heritage today and how important is the past and our memory of the past today in Singapore. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel, whether you're a Singaporean or simply feeling nostalgic about the past and what has disappeared. Very happy to have with us today our first guest, Mr. Charles Ngui, who is a young 71 and who grew up in Old Clementi in the western part of Singapore, in a place that most of us haven't heard of. I certainly haven't heard of it myself, a place called Kampong Gajah, and Gajah means elephant in Malay, in the 1950s. And today, if you go to the SIM and the SUSS University, that's where Kampong Gajah used to be. Charles was one of the young officers in the early days of the EDB, the Economic Development Board. And from that time at EDB, he developed a deep working knowledge of the tool and die industry. That's how I got to know him when I was working on a project on the economic history of Singapore in the last 50, 70 years. And Charlie also knows a great deal about the businesses, big and small, in Singapore in the 70s and 80s. So, big welcome to you, Charles. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks, Doc. I think this is an excellent opportunity to get to meet the wider audience of the Chronicles of Singapore.
Great. Would you want to say a few words about yourself?
Well, I guess having been in this industry for 5 decades, people know me from the days of Enough Don't Bluff, which is the acronym for the EDB. And I spent almost 20 years associated with German companies, and I'm happy to say that I've learned a lot from them. Very exacting people, but yeah, I'm happy to get acquainted, and if there's something that I could chip in, I'll be most happy to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot you can share that we can learn from. I mean, it's one of the things, isn't it, that we often talk about this German company or that German company, but two things I think we often don't talk very much about in this collaboration with the other countries in the world, other companies in the world, and one is what we learn from besides getting their technology and getting them to create jobs in Singapore, what we learn from them in terms of work ethic, in terms of values, and two, how Singaporeans themselves developed their expertise and their skills from this experience.
Yeah, I think there's something about the Germans. They're very focused, but they are looking out for a response from their partners that are committed. And when the moment they see that coming back, it's like playing a game of tennis, right? When the right moves and response is coming up with the right kind of skill level, they will come, they will rise to the occasion and come alongside to help very willingly.
Right. So I guess for the listeners, I think we should clarify when we say we work with the Germans, we mean the German companies, the multinational corporations that were in Singapore in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? What were some of these companies, Charles?
Well, during those days, late 60s, when I was in the industry, it would be machine tools like Deckel, like Gildemeister, like Weiler. This would be people that would not just only sell their machines and also they want their end users, the customers, to really take advantage of the sea of the machines. And very often they would even send their experts, that means the people who make those machines, down to visit the factories and to see what you are doing, and be quite critical. Sometimes they would offend my master craftsmen, we call them sifu, and rank them, saying that they are you doing it wrongly, and they will show it how it could be done better. And it's very, after the initial sense of kind of people being upset, the seafood will just stay back and let them finish the work, and then they will look at it and then comment and say, "Wow, really, this is better." So that's something that we find that from the Germans, they always do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested to talk more about the sifu, right, or the sifu, the masters in this master apprentice relationship that we used to have, and we'll talk more about that later on. So, in terms of the questions that we have for Charles, we are going to go back to the history, the places and people that he came across growing up, and what he remembers of them. So, Charles, tell us about this Kampong Gajah that you were born in. So, Kampong Gajah was in Clementi.
That's correct. That's correct. Maybe the backdrop of that is that that winding road, as you can see from the map, does not have any specific locations other than milestone markers along the road. And actually, where my house is located, there used to be a milestone marker showing 10.5 miles. That's the distance from the general post office, that milestone marker. So that area has got no other landmarks known. This Clementi Road stretches from the Green Bus Depot, which is actually along Bukit Timah Road, where Yo Hiap Seng is, and you will go along this road, and that road is a very narrow road, just good enough for two vehicles, and it's winding. It's got no street lamps at all, and the only bus service that operates there is from 7 a.m. till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, sorry. And thereafter, you will have to walk that distance. So I used to live was about 1.5 to Bukit Timah Road. So that place where I lived, it's actually surrounded by the school. Jimson School is actually a juvenile delinquent home, and around that area, there's also quarters for the ward inside Jimson School. And later on, there were some squatters that came by and built little huts to be in that area. So as we were saying about this Kampong Gajah, the most significant was an open property next to the school that was used by a Russian former circus trainer by the name of Tremsky. And he used that location to import wild animals from Java, from Borneo, from Siam or Thailand, as it's known today. And, the whole animals will come in at different times and be stored in that location called Kampong Gajah. One of them was, at one time, they had maybe like about 4 or 5 elephants. And to many of us staying there, I was probably about 9 to 10 years old then. We could hear elephants trumpeting, and for the first time hearing it, it was quite shocking because we don't know what's going on. But anyway, that's how they were conducting their businesses. until one morning, I literally felt stomping on the road, and I went out to see what happened, because actually they were walking the elephants. There was a mother elephant and father elephant, and then a baby elephant, you know, in that order. And there was a mahout sitting on top of the lead elephant, just to direct this elephant to stay close to the road, and there was an occasional cars that would pass by to stay away from the vehicle traffic. So that's Kampong Gajah, and the the opposite of the Jimson School actually had also some squatter areas, but the noticeable thing about that area was Chinese temple, and it's really a convent, as we later on I found out, and it's in there that all the Chinese festivals, like Chinese New Year, the first and the 15th day of the lunar month, is observed over there. It is staffed by volunteer uh, nuns, which come in from parts of foreign, even some visiting nuns that will staff the temple. Anyway, um, that is the general area. So whenever we refer to Clementi Road, we would need to use a kind of a marker and say, okay, either the Jimson School or the Chinese temple. Other than that, there's no noticeable reference point. And later on, that little lane to the temple, they did name it as Lidi, Lidi, as the location. Maybe like over 10 to 15 years later, it was Corona florist on the left side of the road. If you come from Bukit Timah, they were relocated from somewhere else, and that's where they started their florist. Well, I think that's a mouthful. I thought that would kind of give some orientation.
So just to clarify, right? When you say Kampong Gajah, you actually mean an actual kampong or a kampong of animals?
Actually, there are people that were the squatters were staying around there.
Okay. So how many houses were there?
From memory, this will be easily about 30 families near this Kampong Gajah. And then on the opposite side, where nearer the temple, will be possibly about another 30 families. The families on the nearer the temple are more Chinese, whereas the one where the nearer to Jimson School, they tend to be more Malays. And because many of the wardens there were Malays, there would be one or two of the wardens which are Chinese. There was an Indian who worked at Jimson School as a medical dresser. He was a medical person. But other than that, when I refer to the kampong, they were mainly all Malays nearer to the school.
Right. So interesting, yeah. So the Chinese villagers, the squatters, what did they do for livelihood?
I think for beginners, they were just basically looking for the cheapest housing available. We bear in mind during those days of the 60s, they would be staying quite far away, and then because of the job, they would be wanting to move to a location that's closer. So many of them were working with, let's say, Green Bus, a bus depot along Bukit Timah Road. Yeah, along Bukit Timah Road. And that's, there used to be a roundabout, a circus there called Bukit Timah Circus. And that circus, one portion of it is, one side of the circus is actually the cemetery, which is right opposite Green Bus Depot. And then the other opposite the cemetery is a huge rubber factory and go down. known as Lam Chun Rubber Factory. And then the other corner is Yo Hiap Sing Sauce Factory. And then if you move along that road further up will be then the Beauty World Market. So yeah.
Yeah, right. So all those are places of employment and places of small business, right? So do you think those villagers would have worked there or sold their wares there by any chance?
Yes, you have a whole range of, some of them are kitchen helpers, some of them are just handyman. So they will be all finding either working in companies or businesses around that area. So these quarters there basically some families would live there, but as I mentioned earlier, it's a squatter, so it's not really conducive for a family, and also small. So often this will be just the person, the employee that is renting a room so that they come back, stay, and then get to work early, because public transportation during those time was almost impossible.
And this was the house, 105 Clementi Road, that Charlie used to stay in with his family. Is that right, Charles?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Tell us about this house.
Well, this building actually is owned by my maternal grandmother, and I think my grandfather passed on in in 1940, before the Japanese War in 1941. So anyway, in this house here, two-story house, actually three families was my own family. There was another uncle and his family would be living there, and then my grandmother. So this home here, all of us will be living. There's about 7 rooms in this um, building. Mainly, it's all on the upper floor. Some of them are small, and some of them are bigger rooms. And this house is actually a shop house. When From what I've been learning from relatives, or who have passed on, that this house was actually a convenient uh, store to back up the supply to Jimson School. So whenever that school was short of supplies, because deliveries didn't come and all that, I was told that my grandmother would stock up supplies that's needed for the school. One of the things that we used to operate is actually, like I said earlier, a convenience store. We would sell kerosene um, from a 55-gallon tank. We will decant them and sell them in bottles. And villagers or squatters that live in that area, these were working people, don't have extra cash and all that. They will come with an empty bottle, and we would just fill up whatever they needed, and we'll just collect, whatever money that they will pay. So you can see from this this house here, the front portion of the house actually is an open area. So sometimes when you have coconuts, the opposite this house actually is a land that's owned by my grandmother. She has a land that has got coconut trees, pomelo trees, durian trees, and I remember that when when somebody would walk by and offer the services to climb up the trees and harvest all the coconuts from the trees, we would have a whole mound of coconuts on the floor, and people passing by their cars or buses, they could stop by there and buy coconuts, or even durians from us. So that's what this house used to. This was some of my childhood memories. I think a total of, let's see, 12 people stayed in this house, from very young kids like myself, then to working adults. Yeah. So this location, it's quite a has a lot of memories for me because there are huge trees nearby, and we have what we call a fruit tree called jambu batu, which is actually like a guava, but it's a multicolored fruit. And we remember that when it's ripe, sometimes during the season when it's ripe, and because it's so high up, we cannot reach it, right? You know, when there's a strong wind that blows, these fruits will just fall off the tree and then will hit some portion of tin roof or onto the tile roof up there, creating some noise. Yeah. So those are some of the memories that I've had.
Yeah, I mean that's such an interesting house. Like, is there your family name on the door?
Yeah, that's actually a family. I don't read Chinese, so I can't tell you anything more than that.
What
I'm
is your
told
family
that
name in Chinese?
my family, my family name actually comes from my father's side, so that's Wei, um, in Mandarin. But my grandmother, she comes from Pontianak. This is Indonesian Borneo, and her family name is actually Wong. Wong, but in those days it's spelled as Bong, Bong. I mean, this is that misnomer.
Right.
Very often family names are translated wrongly because the interpreter decides how it should be spelled.
Yeah. I can't see very well. Is the roof made of atap? Was it brick
No,
or
no.
zinc?
The roof actually is a tile roof.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
It's ceramic tiles along the roof, and of course there have been additions that have been made, alterations, and that's where it's zinc roof. There's,
Mm.
at the side, if you see on the right side of the picture, it's like it's to prevent water from, when the heavy rain comes in with rain, so that rain would really get into the open area on the ground level. They created a shape there. For that will be zinc. But other than that, it's actually a tile roof. And
Right,
for
right.
those, yeah,
Was any of the ground floor, was it used in any way? You said storage just now, right? Was there any like business transaction or business dealings on the ground floor?
in the earlier days, I remember that rice was stored there, uh, sugar, and then uh, maybe some beans. That's about the kind of things that were stored in there. There's one room in the room at the side, which I was told that they uh, in was called a wine room, and I believe that it was used to store maybe cooking wine or maybe even wine also. Then I don't know enough history about them.
Yeah, yeah. Really rural place, right? As you said.
Yes.
Were there other families like this, not the squatters, like your uh, parents and grandparents, which were established, which had been there for a long time in the area?
I think from recall, maybe I think the nearest one will be the Union Chicken Farm, which is maybe about half a mile from where I am, from our house. Uh, After Jimson School, they had some houses and some staff who made them. They basically started off as a poultry farm. So they reared chickens and had and sold eggs, and which later on, when their business for poultry, due to whatever uh, chicken sickness or whatever, they converted that part of it into a restaurant. So they call it Union Poultry Farm. And they were actually known as quite well known for their this delicacy called paper wrap chicken. And people who know this place will call it as Qi Bao Gai, that means Qi as paper wrap chicken.
Right, right. So are you saying that there were no such houses nearby? Like your neighboring area, there were no other houses?
Yeah,
Wow,
right.
that's really interesting. Yeah. Maybe just one last question, right? Like, what do you remember doing here as a kid or in this nearby area? What were the things that you did as a kid?
Well, this is actually an arterial road from Pasir Panjang. Those days, Jurong was almost very underdeveloped as well. So the road that connected, I would say, Alexandra, Pasir Panjang to Bukit Timah will be Clementi Road. So I would say it's a very heavy traffic. And one of the memories that I've had is that I was never, ever trying to cross the road because we saw a lot of road kills like dogs, chickens, cat. So I was forbidden to get across the road. Whenever I need to go out, I need to be accompanied by my elder brothers and sisters. I mean, there was a total of 8 of us in the family.
So anything that you would do along your side of Clementi Road, did you go to that kind of zoo area?
No, I would say there were no paths that was safe enough for me to go on my own. And at that young age, I was strictly never to go out on my own. So no, there's nothing um, that would as a pastime. I mean, the closest would be like if there was some neighborhood kids would come and catch spider from the nearby plants, hibiscus plants. There would be something that I would be attracted to, with children around my age. I'll be curious enough to kind of try and get to them and see what they are doing. But often my mother would be right close by because I'm the youngest, so very often I'm under close scrutiny.
So that was actually a very protective time, right? Like almost a century where you were kind of almost in this very nice little spot in rural Singapore, right? So what was the place that you first knew as you grew up, you became older, of the outside world in Singapore? What was like the first time that you became aware of other places?
Well, it's interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, transportation was almost impossible. So all my exploratory trips would be with an adult, and then if there was a car or friends transport available, that's where we'll go out. So I can't really point or mention a location other than the Beauty World Market, which is the closest wet market for us to buy fresh fish, uh, fresh food, vegetables, chicken, egg, ducks, and pork. That Beauty World Market will be something. Yeah, has a lot of is indelible memory for me because I would be going with my mother at least once or twice a week because we didn't have a refrigerator at home then. It would take us easily half an hour just to wait for the bus. And then the bus ride was quite fast going to the market and shopping and then coming back. So the whole trip will be about 2 to 3 hours trip. So Beauty World Market, to answer your question, will be something in my memory. So I could remember the older portion of Bukit Timah Market and then the newer portion of Bukit Timah Market. And this is actually the, the entrance. It was a T junction between um, Bukit Timah Road and Jurong Road. And this was also the bus terminus for the bus that plied along Clementi Road called EC Bus. So I still remember it's quite a cute name. It's EASY. So EC Bus is the name of the bus, and there we'll have a police station. There's a maternal child health clinic. There are doctors. There are some furniture shops, tire shops, and actually along this Bukit Timah Road, again, this is a trunk road for all vehicles from from Singapore going to Malaya then, and also from Malaya coming to Singapore will pass by the road. So that road is very heavy traffic, and those shops there will be servicing whatever work that needs to be done for tires that are punctured and bicycles that needs to be repaired, oil lamps that need to be uh, repaired or replaced. Yeah.
I mean, the image that I get in my mind is quite kind of contrasting, right? Like this idyllic place in Old Clementi, and then this trunk road with all the traffic and cars and roadkill and what have you got not.
Yeah, I think it's very contrasting. You're correct. Yeah, until maybe like in the late early 70s when Ngui Technical College started, there were no other modern facility. I mean, for the longest time, that whole area there was not developed at all. The road was really windy.
Right. So, just to round out then, the whole area has been completely transformed, right? Is Gimson School still around?
Yeah, the Jimson School was around until I think up till the 80s from memory. It is now the location for SIM and I think there's another SUSS university that's there. No, they have moved completely. I think this whole strategy of how some of these problems with juvenile delinquents and people school dropouts and all that have been addressed differently. They are no longer there.
And tell us about the fate of your house.
Well, part of the whole development for the area of Clementi Road, Ulu Pandan, and also the build the Clementi HDB estate, there was a very ambitious plan that the government rolled out. It's called the container port. Believe it or not, Clementi Road is way away from the port area. But the strategy then was to build a container port in the whole locality. I don't know. I mean, if you ask me, I think it was more of a strategy for land acquisition because a lot of these were landowners, private landowners. There was quarter problems. There were also at that time and isolated cases of robbery. So that whole area had to be developed. So with this ambitious plan called the container port plan, that the whole acquisition went out to all those people who were living in that area, and hence that 105 Clementi Road had to be demolished. It was acquired by the I think then was the land department. I think they acquired the land and they would send surveyors to measure up how much space of area that had cemented area. They will measure up to the closest inch, because they had to compensate it accordingly. And then on the opposite side where all the fruit trees and farms area was, there was ponds there. They would they basically just took that whole area and acquired it.
Where did the family move to?
Many of these families actually refused to.
Where did your family go to?
Oh, I see. In my particular instance was because we moved across the road. That was my grandmother's land. So across the road, we had space there to build a small house, and by then each of the three families living in there had to find their own place to live. Yeah, so I think at some point the land office offered some compensation. I think it was like $50 for a fruit tree or something like that, and they would give you temporary lease for 30 years to build a house, a wooden house.
Right. And the younger families, did they move to, your family, the younger groups, did they move to HDB?
I think those days they did move to HDB. They moved to Commonwealth area.
Your parents, where did they move to?
My parents moved across the road.
Okay. In that small farm, right? Small house. Okay. I was going to ask you, like, if how did you feel when eventually you had to leave the area and the entire area was redeveloped?
I think it was really a whirlwind for me. I personally, at that age, as a young, later on a student, when I moved out, I don't understand the whole big idea of this acquisition, what they wanting to do. Later on, I did find out that actually their explanation there was a railway track between Malaysia and Singapore that runs up to Tanjung Pagar, right? And this rail track is perhaps about 2 miles from all the squatter areas. So the idea was when they acquired the whole area for a container port, I think the strategy was to use the rail to trains to bring containers to store from Keppel Harbour, from Pasir Panjang, or even from Jurong much later to put their containers, park the containers in there. So some of this reasoning doesn't stand to at that time to reason at us, because I recall hearing some of the grievances from these older people that lived in that area, because all of them had to relocate, and they didn't have solution at all. It could have been without proper sanitation of water. Many of them didn't have their own, there were no pipes. So it was just dependent on well water. But this whole process of reasoning out to the men on the street why they had to do that wasn't well communicated. And many of them were very angry, upset. So I did remember that for many years, I've been harboring a lot of that sentiments of unfairness, of injustice that were forced onto Singaporeans at that time. During the time of my growing up, yes, it was interesting. I remember singing "God Save the Queen," right? Because we were then a colony, and then I was learning. There was Majula Singapura that came along, and then for 3 years, from 1963 to 65, I learned that song, Malaysia Forever. Sing a happy song because we had to learn to embrace the nation, the colony that was being independent in 65, and then we were going to be joined to Malaysia. So these are some memories that I've had growing up. I would say that maybe after almost like 40, 50, I'm trying to find some uh, closure to some of these funny, unexplained events.
I mean, I think that's really quite an important point, right? Because what you said, that maybe because at the time, inadequate information, there was pre-internet, definitely, and some of the other people as well, not just you, you were young, but there were some other people who were older, who were adults, but who maybe because of other reasons did not really understand or embrace the idea of development. And for these people and for you as well, that search for meaning and understanding still goes on today, long after those places have been completely transformed. Right. So these are sort of questions, and we are always trying to find answers about, what happened in the past, isn't it?
Well said. No.
Thank you very much, Charles. I think we ran a bit over time, but learned so much from you that I actually didn't know much about this before. I think when I interviewed you first, right, we covered this in like 5 minutes. I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
So now I know a lot more about you. So be fearful, all right? All right. So thanks everyone for listening to us. This is our first episode, and as you can see, we're still figuring our way, about how to do this technically, and improve on the uh, entire interview, the technical, the hardware, and the way we do it. If you have any ideas or comments or questions about Kampong Gajah, about Old Clementi, share your memories below in the link, or write to us. Our emails are in the link below as well. In future, there will be other videos about old Singapore, and we'll talk with Charles again on the later episodes in his life, and maybe find out more questions that he still has today. And finally, if any of you who have fond memories or vivid memories about the past, you want to come onto the podcast, you are very welcome to do so. Please drop a note and let me know. Good night for now. Bye. Thanks, Charles. Bye.
Thanks.